Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Mr. M Rocks. This is going to be lesson 6.5. I'm just going to add a little thing to lesson 6 and go back and make a couple of changes in lesson 6. I've actually opened up a brand new file, and this is called Waypoint Test. And what we're going to do in this particular episode is we're going to learn how to do waypoints in a different way. If you remember back in the chapter or lesson 6, we did waypoints by hard coding the values, the x and the y coordinates, into points and then loading them into an array. And that has some advantages, but there's some disadvantages as well. What I've done in this episode is I've created on the main stage, I go in the library and I've got a rectangle called background. And on the background I've got a waypoint. So I take this waypoint and I drag it out onto the stage, or onto the background rather. And what's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and detect each of these waypoints. Now, in the library, I only have one waypoint, but on the stage, we're not going to call these out dynamically during the run of the program, but what I will do is I'll find out during the run of the program where they are. So I need to have a naming convention that I can follow in my scripting language. And I'm going to call this WP1, WP2, and so forth all the way through. And my enemies are going to come out and they're going to follow these waypoints in order. Okay. Now to do this, I've got to have some way of taking each of these movie clips, which are a kind of display object, and I've got to load them into an array. So in the old version of lesson 6, I hard-coded those in the main game. I went to a function called load waypoint array, and I put the values of each point into that array. This time, I'm going to do that differently, and to see that, we're going to go into waypoint test. And so I'm going to just go through this code with you really quickly, and then we're going to talk about how to implement this into the other function. But I've got a class called waypoint test. This is my document class for this test program. And I've got three variables. I've got waypoint object is a display object. Now a display object is kind of a superset of things like movie clips and, or let's say movie clips and sprites and graphics are all types of display objects. They fit inside the display object container. I'm going to load these guys into an array of waypoints, just like I did before with points, but now I'll be loading the array with waypoint object. And then I have my background, which is that rectangle that I just showed you. So the waypoints are loaded onto the background before the run of the program, and then everything else is going to run similarly. I create my new array. I put my background. I'm actually not even representing it on the stage. If I were to run the program right now, we wouldn't see it. It's not important that we see it. What I want to do is I want to make sure we're loading the array. So in effect, this program is loading the array of waypoints in a different way. So that's really all I'm doing here. Now, I'm going to call this function called load waypoints. It's a public function, load waypoints. It doesn't return anything. But I'm going to use a new kind of structure in Actionscript. I'm going to use a while loop. Instead of a for loop, which we've used before, we're using a while loop. And I'm also using a new function called getChildByName. Okay, so the way this works is I create a variable, and this is going to be I for index, and I set it equal to 1. And then I have waypoint object. Okay, so it's going to call a function called getChildByName, and getChildByName is attached to the background rectangle. So when I say bg.getChildByName, it's going to look on the background rectangle for this naming convention, a string WP with an integer. When I first start, this is going to be integer 1, and so if this is all working properly, I'm going to look on my background, look for a movie clip called WP1, and if it's there, it's going to load it into this container, which is a display object. I should notice that, or I should mention that even though I'm creating my display object up here, I'm declaring it, I cannot instantiate a display object. That's just one of the rules of Actionscript, and so I can't instantiate it, but what I can do is I can find the movie clip and I can load it into this container. Now, the while loop is right here. The while loop looks or works in some ways very much like an if statement. I have while, instead of if I have while, and then I have a condition. The difference between a while statement and an if statement is the while is going to continue to loop through this code as long as this condition is true. Remember, an if statement only goes through if it's true. It executes the code once. The while loop is going to continue to execute this code over and over and over until this is no longer true. So the for loop works really well when you know the upper and lower bounds of a loop. If you know it's going to go 10 times exactly and you want to go for I equals 1 to 10, for loops work great. But here I want to be able to make this code a little bit more flexible. I might have 10 movie clips on the stage. I might have 100 movie clips on the stage. It doesn't matter. It's just as long as I keep finding another movie clip according to this naming convention, I'm good. So the first one, if it finds the first one, WP1, if it finds it, this says if waypoint object does not equal null, if it doesn't equal null, that means it does exist. Okay, so does not equal null means it does equal something. So if this guy is not null, that means I've got an object called WP1. I'm going to come in here. And what I do is I simply push it into that array the same way I did before. I push waypoint object now into my array of waypoints. Then I increment I. So now I is equal to 2. And then I go back and I look again. Now, do I find waypoint 2? If I find waypoint 2, then this is not null. I come back up here, and this guy does not equal null, so I come back in, I do the whole thing again. I equals 3. I look for that. If it exists, I come back up in here. Now, as soon as I come to the end of my waypoints, I gets incremented. Let's say my last waypoint is 7. This guy is now 8. I go ahead and get getChildByName, waypoint 7. I load it in here. This guy will be null. This is true, or this is actually now false, so I break out. And I just put a trace statement here so we can see this run. And if this is all running correctly, all I'm going to get, I won't see anything on the stage, but I'll simply get an array. Waypoints has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 objects. And if I look back at my original background object, let's count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I were to take this guy out and put in an 8th one and give this guy the name up here, I'll go ahead and give him the name WP8. Save that, and then I come and run my program again. Now, if this all looks good, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 objects. And all I've done is I've loaded my array of waypoints. I did it differently before, so really that's the only significant change. Everything else is done pretty much the same. So I'm going to go ahead and make that lesson 6.2 or 6.5, and from that point we will go ahead and go back and look at our other project.